Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagger Haas. And in this video, we need to talk about how Heritage Auctions literally makes zero money. They make zero money. They got the platinum auction going on right now. And I gotta say, with the prices that books are coming in for, I'm worried about Heritage Auction with the commissions that they're gonna be making. But luckily for them, Swagger Haas here made a purchase for $300. So they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay overall that I was able to get one of my wish list books from my 2022 Xmas video right here in January. So I'm already doing pretty good, checking one off the list. So in this video, I'm going to do this unboxing, and then later on in the video, maybe more importantly, I'm going to kind of talk about some of the highlights of the Heritage Auction Platinum session that is going on right now. And it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of different stories coming out of the auction, a lot of different takeaways that we can pull from it, and we can have a lot of learned things as we move into 2023. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel doing those things, I appreciate it. But let's get into this video here today. Now, this, of course, like I already mentioned, is a box from Heritage Auctions. I, of course, did not get this particular book in the current platinum auction that is going on. This was in one of their weekly auctions. And this was one of those books that I had on my Christmas wish list for 2023. A book that, you know, I had been kind of eyeing recently. I had some opportunities to pick this one up on other auctions at times, but I just didn't pull the trigger. Actually, one time I messed up on eBay. I just sort of forgot to bid on this one. But this is another EC book. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. Another EC book from a title that I needed to kind of add here to the PC because it is the most classic of the EC titles, in my opinion. And the book I am talking about, of course, is this classic cover by Al Feldstein, Tales from the Crypt, number 22, the awesome graveyard cover. Dude getting pulled into the grave. Camera focus, you are ruining it for the audience at home. And this is a very, very cool book. One that was on my Christmas wish list. I mean, I've always loved the Al Feldstein covers from 21 up through about 24. I think that, in my opinion, those are the classics. I mean, I realize 22, 23, 24 are kind of like all within the same aesthetic. I just have a fondness for 22 as well. And this was the top one that I wanted. I also would love to add 23 to the collection as well. Maybe I'll do that at some point. But, you know, I'm running out of wall space, guys. I mean, it keeps invading down here. The EC books, I think I'm going to have to add more shelves to the collection. But this one is a pretty decent copy. It is probably a 3.0, I would assume. A little bit of a tear right here on the spine, a little bit of writing on the cover, which, you know, maybe if I ever send this one in for grading, I can maybe get that erased or at least lightened a little bit, which would help the aesthetics. Some spine roll that I think could be fixed, but super happy to add this one to the collection. You know, with these EC books, it's really interesting because, you know, for me, I'm not trying to necessarily dolphin this thing. I'm not trying to flip it for massive gains. This is one that I personally just want in the PC. And, you know, for me, it's like, I also don't need, you know, the gains file copy. You know, I don't need that 9.4. So for me, it's like, I like seeing opportunities where I can get that low grade raw copy because typically that's going to yield me the cheapest price to add to my collection, which in this case, I think it did. I was able to win the bid for about $260. So $260 for this particular book, 3.0 grade, I think is actually a really good deal overall. And luckily, Heritage Auction gets to make a little bit of commission on my $260 sale because they're going to need it because we now need to talk about the platinum auction that is happening at Heritage Auctions and some of the sales that are going on. Because I got to say, here in the year of 2023, we're not hitting those 7-figure marks that I feel like we should be hitting for a lot of books. Although it depends on how you want to kind of break it all down. I mean, there's the bearish perspective and then there's the bullish perspective. And I think depending on how you want to look at the numbers, I can give you tales from both sides of it. I mean, shout out to Ryan over at Automatic Comic Books. We always have these conversations and we talk a lot about some of these sales. And, you know, I think it just depends on your sort of perspective of what you think certain books should be hitting. But the first one we have to talk about is this big boy right here, Amazing Fantasy 15 in a 9.2 grade, sold for $810,000. Now, this number that you see is the second biggest number that an Amazing Fantasy 15 book has ever hit for itself. So on the surface, you would think $810,000. I mean, that is the second biggest number this book has ever hit. That's pretty good overall. But, you know, I mean, depending on how you want to evaluate it, I mean, we all know the 9.6 grade last year hit that $3 million mark. What was it exactly? 3.6, I believe that it was. Yeah, 3.6 for this one here in Heritage at the end of 2021. Now, this is the highest book on the census, and we're talking about a 9.2 grade right here, which if we go down to the 9.2, the last sale for this book was in 2019 and sold roughly around that $600,000 range. So we went 2019 $600,000 to 2023 $810,000. You know, over 4 years, that's about a 6 to 8% return on your money. And I mean, depending on how we want to look at it, I mean, 6 to 8% is pretty good returns, typically speaking, for any form of investment. But I suppose it's really bad returns if we're talking about comic books here and we're acquiring a lot bigger risk when we're buying, very, very expensive collectibles. We should be expecting, much, much higher returns, considering that this is a space that we're effectively rolling the dice in. We're gambling on this one. So, depending on how you want to feel about that, is it a big number? Is it a small number? Let me know what you guys think in the comments. It depends on how you want to view the current market. But considering we are in 2023 with the coming possible recession, it feels like 810 is actually pretty good. Like if I was somebody who was selling, I wouldn't feel so bad about this number. At least I made some money. All right, the next book we have to talk about here is, of course, the Superman #1 in the 5.0 grade that sold for $675,000. Another big, massive sale for this book right here. And it's really interesting because I feel like of the, golden age blue chip books, it feels like Superman 1 has been coming up for sale quite a lot. It's really funny to me. I mean, like, there's not that many on the census, but it feels like there's been a decent amount of sales for them. And we have even 2 more coming in the Comic Connect auction that happens next month. So pretty surprising to see how many are going on sale for this particular book. But 675,000, again, another big number. But if we dig into, some of the recent sales for this one, we can take a look here at a 5.0, actually sold for $720,000 earlier this year, here at Heritage, the 5/13/2022. So earlier in the year, this book got $720. Now it's effectively down $50,000 on the sale. Now let's take a look at the book. Is this book present a lot better than the other one? I mean, this is cream to off-white, pretty decent presenting copy. This one is fairly decent presenting copy too at off-white pages. And to me, when I look at this number, like, yes, it's gone down since the top of last year, but also, I kind of think about it and I'm like, I mean, it's not that bad depending on how you want to kind of break it all down. I mean, here at the 4.5 level, you had a sale for $517,000. Then here at the 4.0, you had a sale for $815. That one seems way too high. Like, that was pretty crazy that that particular book got $815. And then down here at the 3.0, you had a sale for $420. So, there's a lot of price compression kind of going on depending on any given book, any given day. And I think that that has a lot to do with the aesthetics of the book. All right, let's go on now to the Batman 1 sales. There were actually 2 in this auction. And the first one we have to talk about is this Batman 1 at the 6.0 grade that went for $552,000. In my opinion, I think that that was a pretty decent number for this particular book. Here at the 6.0 grade, there hasn't been a sale in quite a while, but at a 5.0, it was a $510,000 sale early last year. Now the 6.0 costs you $40,000 more. Now you would think that maybe from a value range, like a point per grade value range, where a 4.0 costs $300,000, a 5.0 costs $500,000, you would think a 6.0 should maybe cost $700,000, but we didn't really get that bump. So again, it really depends on your outlook of like, do you have the bearish scenario or do you have the bullish scenario? Do you think that 552 is a good number or a bad number? I mean, at the end of the day, it's selling for more than the 5.0, which, for my money, I think is still pretty good overall, especially now that we're in the year of 2023 with the economic factors that we're dealing with. Now, the other Batman sale that we had was this 1.8 at $126,000. And this one is one that I think you could more effectively argue that was a pretty weak sale, simply due to the fact that earlier this year, we did have one go for $180,000. And this copy that recently sold is equally as good of a presenting copy as this one right here. In fact, this one has a little bit of a tape pull, and this one right here doesn't have that tape pull. You might even argue that this is a better looking copy than this previous 1.8. And that would have been probably one of the best entry-level Batman ones that you could have had in recent memory. I mean, here at a 1.5 grade, you had a $103,000 one. So, for a 0.3 grade better, all it took was $20,000. But you can sort of make the argument that that is a weak sale for this one. Again, it depends on how you want to evaluate it, because a 2.0 sold for $174, and that's in comparison to the 1.8 at $180. So again, Batman 1, sort of big sale, sort of not big sale. How you want to evaluate it. Again, I'm going to have the stance that here in 2023, I think that those sales are pretty good, all things considered. One fun one to talk about here, Flash Comics here at the 5.0, massive sale, $192,000. This is one of those books that hasn't gone on sale for quite a while. I mean, last sale we had was a 2.0 that went for $75, but nothing at this high of grade at the 5.0 range. So huge sale for Flash Comics #1. And this is a good, example of even Golden Age books that haven't had sales recently. Like we talked about how, Superman 1 and Batman 1, they're very, very rare, but they're also the flagship books that get sold at least a couple times a year. So, a lot of people have eyeballs on it. There's not a lot of people that are always trying to sell their Flash Comics 1. So those Superman 1s and Batman 1s have always been repriced. Like you'll always get a sense of what they should maybe sell for, at least a couple times a year, whereas this Flash Comics one, you have no idea. So that is why you'll see these massive jumps in prices here at $192 and a huge sale for this particular book. All right, let's go on now to, some of the losers, I would say, in this particular auction. And the first loser we have to talk about is All-Star Comics #8, first appearance of Wonder Woman. This is definitely a book that, I feel like the movies have actually affected the perceived value of this. And that's something that is really funny. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think that Golden Age books would have too much effect on, what's going on in the movie space. But, I do think that there are some of those books that from time to time do have, a little bit of correlation. And I think this one is a good example of that. Here at the 4.5 grade, it sold for $43,200. And funny enough, the 4.5 has been one of those books that has sold a lot actually in recent years. If we kind of open it up here, we can see that there actually was a sale in December, just, a few weeks back, that sold for $57,000. So, I don't know, maybe this was a better presenting copy. It's an older label. Maybe somebody was going to CPR their Wonder Woman, who really knows. But then here in Comic Connect earlier in 2022, we had a $42,000 one, then a $56,000 one, then a $43,000 one. Then all the way back in 2017, you had a $49,000 one. And then in 2016, when you had the Wonder Woman movie, you had a $54,000 one. So this one has definitely kind of, yo-yoed up and down. But, if we're taking a sort of bird's eye view of it, I mean, I guess you could also kind of say that, this is all within the randomness and imperfectness of comic book investing. I mean, like I say on the channel, like again and again, I mean, you never really know. It depends on who's watching, who's ready to buy, what are the aesthetics of each book. Maybe there's a flaw that somebody doesn't like. This one seems to have like a little bit of a miscut at the top up here. Maybe there are those collectors that, they just hate their miscuts. And then all of a sudden you take out one buyer, and that can affect the value drastically. So much, to the point of $10,000 to $15,000 of a difference. And then the next one we have to talk about, probably another big loser of the event, is this Incredible Hulk 181. This is a book that continues to go on the slide. Here we have a 9.8 sell for $69,000. Now, there is a factor with this particular book that did hurt it in comparison to its counterparts, and that has to do with the fact that it is actually an off-white to white pages book. Usually, I think if you're buying that 9.8 grade, you might as well get the white pages. In fact, if I got this book back after submitting it to CGC, I'd be so pissed. I'd be like, dude, come on, CGC, how are you going to do me like that? How are you going to do me with the off-white to white pages? But I think that that particular factor probably hurt this book a decent amount. But I also do think that this book was still due for a correction overall. I mean, 9.8s have 137 on the census. And if we just rewind the clock back to, 2020 or even, 2019, I mean, this was a $50,000 book in September of 2020, and now it was selling for, double that, 138 at a certain point. And based on what we've been looking at with our indexes and seeing prices pull back and correcting, I mean, this was just way above the trend line. Even the last couple sales at 90,000 and 96,000 still are way too high above the trend line overall. So I think that this pullback for this 9.8 down to the $70,000 range is actually, something that needed to happen. And it's probably a good thing. I think this is probably where this book should be selling overall, if not even slightly less. Anywhere between 60 and 70,000, I think, is a more effective value for this book. I think a lot of people, depending on if you're a bear or a bull, you're going to think about this as like, oh, Hulk 181 is crashing. Or you could think about it as, just Hulk 181 just blew up too much. And now this is the proper prices that it should be selling for. All right, a few more interesting sales I want to talk about that I won't sort of belabor, but I thought that this was interesting too. Here we had a CGC 7.0 for Incredible Hulk 1 sell right next to a CBCS Incredible Hulk 1 at a 7.5 grade. And guess which one got a higher value? Well, the CGC one at a 0.5 less grade sold for $63,000, where the CBCS one with a 0.5 higher grade sold for $58,800. So a $5,000 difference for the book that is effectively lower grade. And that again has to do with the fact that, there is a CGC preference. So that is something that is, interesting to talk about, the question of should you get CGC or CBCS? Well, here you have two Grail books sell back to back, one of which is slightly higher of a grade, and that one sold for less. I mean, I think that that is kind of within reason. If you're somebody out there who maybe bought the CBCS book, I mean, there's nothing to stop you from cracking it and then resubmitting to CGC. I mean, I know it's a lot of money to kind of, roll the dice in that situation, but I would assume that if you're careful and you're looking at these high-res images of the book, you can kind of tell that it is in fact a 7.0 grade. You wouldn't have to worry about it dropping to a 6.5. So you could have saved a little bit of money on this. Both of them are white pages, so that didn't seem to have a factor, but interesting to talk about, of course, because of the fact that it is a CGC CBCS situation. Another one that's kind of an interesting back-to-back sale discussion here is this Ultimate Fallout 4 Djurjevic variant, which a 9.8 white page sold for $43,200 in the blue label here. But then you had a CGC 9.8 signature series signed by Bendis, and this one sold for $32,400. So, the blue label sold for a lot more than the signature book, to the tune of a $10,000 difference. So the fact that Bendis touched this book right here hurt its value by $10,000. This is a very interesting one to think about, one that I think is kind of an example of not everybody likes those signature books. And I think if you're actually kind of playing with this kind of level of money and you're talking about wanting something in your collection, I mean, like, does Bendis really move the needle in that same way that Stan Lee does? I'm not so sure. Maybe you would just rather prefer not to have any obstruction on the cover like a signature. And that's really one of the reasons why people would rather prefer this one right here. So something to think about when we talk about, are signature books always worth it? It really depends. And in any given situation, people could have a preference one way or another. And I think at this very, very high end where people are, super hardcore collectors, it makes sense that they wouldn't want to have anything sort of obstructed on the art. Now, the last little book I want to talk about, shout out to Como Comic Books out there, is this Tomb of Dracula #1 at the 9.8 grade white pages. This one had a sale of $5,280, which is a massive, massive drop off from the peaks to which it was selling. Here you can see this book was commanding at a certain time $12,000 in September of 2021, $10,000 in January, another $12,000 in April, and then another $11,000 in June, and then now has dropped off all the way back to the $5,000 range. But we have to put this into perspective here, right? Because if we rewind the clock back to 2020, we can see that this was a $3,000 book. So the fact that it shot up to $12,000, quadrupling in price, is just an indication that, you know, it just got way too inflated. And now with this current sale at the 5,280, we're sort of back to the trend line overall. And again, that's really the big takeaway that we have to think about when we talk about a lot of these auctions and we're looking at books, you know, pulling back, or this book is crashing, or whatever the case is, you know, if the book sold in 2021 and 2022 and it doubled or tripled or quadrupled in price, it's going to have the pullback. It's going to have the correction, even at those massive high grades like Incredible Hulk 9.8. Like eventually the correction will come for you. And if you're a book that got priced in that time frame, you are susceptible to this new economic climate. Even if you're a golden age book, I mean, typically speaking, golden age books are always going to go up in value. But if you're a golden age book that sold at the height of the market, you know, you might have had a couple bidders overpay for your effective value at that point, and you might have some of those pullbacks later on, like we had with the 1.8 Batman #1. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me talking about the Platinum Heritage Auction. Did you guys buy anything in that Heritage Auction? Luckily for Heritage, I made this $300 purchase, so they don't have to worry about comic book prices going down in value because they can still make commissions from me. Anyways, that's all for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I'll see you in the next one.